So what an extraordinary moment we find ourselves in. I mean, we are smack bang in the middle of a story war, a narrative war right now. I'm sure, like me, many of you have been sent a video from a friend or a relative with a link to the coronavirus, the truth behind the coronavirus, or 5G, or the deep state, or Bill Gates and vaccinations, or the Great Awakening. I mean, there are so many stories flying around right now, which is understandable at a time where our traditional structures have temporarily dissolved. We're creatures that look for patterns of meaning. We look to anchor ourselves in turbulent times. So it makes sense that these stories are proliferating. But I think some of them are now having a deleterious impact. A lot of people are feeling very unsure and don't know what to believe. I've been making documentaries for the last 10 years, and that requires an enormous amount of research. You have to look at the narrative and then look at the counter-narrative. And I did explore some of these stories. I spent 4 years reading all of David Icke's books, joining the dots, questioning everything. And there was something intoxicating about reading some of that stuff and feeling that you had, or I had, this inside word or a scoop that the rest of society hadn't woken up to yet. That was very alluring. Plus, there is a huge tribe that you can plug into now, a sense of community. And it's easy to sort of see a video that confirms that cognitive bias. It aligns with what you've been reading about. But I think that we have to acknowledge that also that there are some kernels of truth to some of these stories. And this is, I think, what is amplifying some of these stories. We've seen that the media have been quite manipulative on both sides, and that's why we're sort of losing faith in those media institutions. And also understand that this is a tactic that has been used for a long time. The Russians really exploited this, their KGB training. About 25% of that training is to find stories that could potentially unravel democracies around the world. And a lot of those stories do have a kernel of truth, and they use them to drive a wedge through a society. And they say that they don't really believe in traditional warfare of using guns and weapons and whatnot. They actually try and find a culture's values and then try and break them apart. And that's what they've done really well in America. And in particular, they're using social media now, and other people are using similar tactics. But it's just created this incredibly polluted and toxic information environment. And I think one of the most concerning things is that Trump is sort of being perceived as this guy who is leading this great awakening, that he is the one who's outing this stuff. And this suits him really well, because while we are over here distracted and he's sending these inflammatory tweets and we're all distracted and writing about that, he is doing all these things at a policy level that are causing huge destruction. He has rolled back now almost 100 environmental protection acts that have been accrued over the last few decades. That includes protecting endangered animals, reversing clean water acts, allowing more pesticides and chemicals onto the land, allowing cars to be more polluting than they have been previously. So these are not the actions of a man who's leading a great awakening. These are the actions of someone who is siphoning billions of dollars to some of his corporate friends. So it's really important that we just don't buy the one story, that we do the deep dive and we research the counter narrative as well, because that's what's tricky right now. We are being put into these two groups and these tribes, and we're just fighting each other and trying to prove who's wrong or right. And we're ignoring it. There is this gray area in the middle where we need to sit and acknowledge that both sides are playing games right now and are actually pitting us against each other, which is the last thing we need to be doing. We should be moving forward and solving problems and creating solutions, but instead we're stuck in this fight or flight mode. So I think moving forward, it's really important that we understand that this is happening and that we're very discerning with the information we put out there, that we do fact check it and do the deeper dive. And this is what good institutions do. Media outlets still do that, but we're not doing that ourselves. It's very easy to watch a video where someone's being interviewed by someone who already aligns with our values, so they're not probing and asking the deep questions. Plus, it takes a lot of time to actually read the counter-narrative. It's a lot easier just to see a video that aligns with your values and share it on. But Sir John Glubb was a historian who talked about, he studied the collapse of civilizations, and he said that democracies really unraveled once they lost a sense of shared value and shared truth. So that's where we are right now. We're at this precipice. And I think it's up to all of us to be much more discerning about the information we share. Because having shared my films with to people at very high levels and world leaders in some cases, I don't think there is this shadowy government that's controlling everything. I think it is a flawed architecture of our system. We've created a system based on rivalry and intense domination, and so people that have those traits, that are very good at winning the game and showing no empathy, they get to the top. They accrue huge amounts of money, then they get to set the rules of the game. So I think it's about acknowledging that we have a problem with the functionality of our system, and that this is allowing all these bad actors to pollute our information environment. So it's So important right now, just to make sure that you know what you're putting out into the collective hive mind.